And these two poets, who are both dear friends, are poets of the world. And so I'm really glad that we get to share their work with all of you. I want to also just start by acknowledging that we're in this moment of incredible upheaval in the country of Iran. It's not new to that part of the world. My friends from Iraq and Lebanon know what it's like to be glued to your Twitter feed trying to get news about a place. But I want to start by acknowledging the bravery and the absolute resilience of young people, and especially women and girls, who are fighting to throw off a really especially oppressive regime that has been in power for 4 decades. And before I came over here, I texted Steve and I was like, hey, can we play the song by Shervin Hajipur, which has become the anthem of the protests in Iran. Well, yeah, it's really powerful to see it, but I want to encourage you. It's called Baraye, or For. You can find it translated into English. You can see it. And he composed this, I mean, it's a poem. It's a poem based on tweets. And the tweets are why people are protesting. So the title of the song is Because, and each line is written by somebody in a tweet, why they're protesting. It's absolutely beautiful and has become the kind of de facto anthem of this moment. And I just read yesterday that the Grammy nominations were flooded with the nomination of this song. Unfortunately, the songwriter was almost immediately jailed. He's in jail for inciting riots because he composed an anthem. So that tells you something. And fellow poet and fellow Iranian American, and that's Farnaz Fatemi, who I met her, and that it was there that I learned that her sister Tara had a twin sister named Farnaz, and I've since become friends with both of them. They're both wonderful writers. And Farnaz and I have shared a lot of paths together, including her work appearing in several anthologies that I published before. So it's really a thrill for me to see her first collection walking in the world. She is an Iranian American poet and writer and founding member of the Hive Poetry Collective and a former writing instructor at UC Santa Cruz. Her newly published collection, Sister Tongue, which you can purchase over there, won the 2021 Stan and Tom Wick Poetry Prize and was selected by Tracy K. Smith. And if you don't know who Tracy K. Smith is, you ought to look her up because she's a heavy hitter too. Former poet laureate of the United States. Farnaz's poems and lyric essays have appeared in Poem a Day, Pedestal Magazine, the Young Journal, Catamaran Literary Reader, Crab Orchard Review, and Grist Journal, as well as Tupelo Quarterly, and most recently in the anthology Essential Voices, Poetry of Iran and its Diaspora, and the collection that I edited, Let Me Tell You Where I've Been, New Writing by Women of the Iranian Diaspora. So it's a great pleasure for me to welcome Farnaz Fatemi.
Thank you, Persis. Is the microphone just good where it is, or should I turn it? Yeah, is that good? Great. Such a pleasure to be here, and I do owe much of that to Persis, who encouraged me when I was first writing to send work out, to keep writing, to believe in what I was doing and how I was doing it, and really, just it's great to be here. It's also wonderful to be at the Poetry Center, San Francisco State. It's a legendary place for me as a Bay Area poet. I got an MFA at Mills in the late 90s and spent time here. So it's just, thank you for having me. Let me just tell you a little bit about this book, Sister Tongue. Zaban Khahar. Siri talking back to me back there. There are many themes in this book. Language, distance, women, belonging, not belonging, home, nationality. They all come together in the way that I started to try to think about myself as an Iranian American, as a Californian born to immigrant Iranian parents, and then in my adult life, navigating, really learning to speak Farsi. And wanting to do that led me back to Iran. And as an adult, the first time I was back there was 2001. So the book is made up of traditional-looking poems and then a very long lyric poem, a prose poem, lyric essay, you can call it whatever you want, that's called Sister Tongue. And it was, it's probably in total 25 pages of prose poetry. And it is now the spine of the book. It is in chunks throughout the book. So when I read a little bit of prose, that's from this long piece called Sister Tongue. And they don't have, that's their titles. So I'll just say I'm moving into the prose here, and then I'll move back into traditional, traditional-looking poetry. And most of that poem, by the way, takes place in Iran. In case, I will just drop in there at the beginning, and you'll see. Pay attention to time. I'm going to start with a poem called Untranslated. In the silence of my girlhood, spoons clattered in glasses of tea, the squeak of the front door closing. I was the child I'd never have. I listened for clues. I spoke without saying a thing. I made sounds to fill the spaces I could see around everyone. My teeth and eyes gleamed, face open, a flower, as if to say to these people, speak, say things I understand. Their untranslated words whoosh by, an autumn gust, staticky din of English and Farsi with afternoon fruit and cookies, my lips mouthing along with them to pay attention as I wrote their stories in my head, rearranged the letters into meaning. I heard the squished sounds of a heartbeat in a stethoscope, pump and thrum. In the languages of women I could have been, I felt both lonely and contained. We were chadorless, light-skinned. All the women who disappeared into the silence inside me, I pull from the roar of the past. I make introductions, by which I mean I want the foreigner in me to meet the foreigner in me. And this is from the prose. A chorus. Kharaji hasti. Are you a foreigner? I visit the mosque in Nain, the town where my parents' grandparents were born. It is my only visit. How can I help you see the mosque made of bricks in this town I've seen only once, this town from which both my parents descend? If you can't see the color of the bricks, I'll be lying. You'll get to a place you think you know, not the one I know. It's the tide of those already imagined ideas I fight off. For over a decade, I have tried to explain by describing the bricks as butter yellow. Butter yellow. Great aunts and uncles in the dust of the courtyard. Surely you see them. A mosque, yellow cream, earthy, rooted, and rooting me into it. Nain, town of my ancestors. I could take you back 200 years. A breeze in the courtyard carries the voices of people with my name. None of my relatives would confess to unbelief. Do I shame them when I claim it for myself? They instructed their children how to pray, where to face, how the body changes as it kneels and curves over itself. How soothing to try to get closer to God or just be outside near the mosque's walls with other people. I eavesdrop, and it happens to me, chronically faithless, standing there, listening for them. I feel their elbows brush mine, hear the blood moving, even under all those clothes. My shadow self, everything I don't say, can't, or wish I did, but also the self I never had to become, the family by no young mother, missed by no one, the twilight lifetime that lingers in songs other people sing. The only mistranslation is belonging. There is no word for it in any of my tongues. There are no tongues, so maybe that's my trouble. How to find a word inside a vacuum. The din itself is home, but home was never a hearth, and that explains some things. I belong deep inside my own gut, digesting seeds rained from my ancestors' dreams, where compasses keep spinning, where an avalanche of rare earth blankets any inkling of sun. I belong to my own hungry future, never oriented on the map and never slaked. A lover once looked down the well of my lungs and called me nomad. I shook her off, but she was right about a magnet that keeps moving in the night, stealing off to a different north. Stealing off to a new north, I confound myself as if I were a butterfly resisting pins. Another prose section here. And this, my twin is in this section. She's sort of all through the book. It's hard to avoid. And she's also on the cover. So you see a passport on the cover, and we shared a passport when we were children, which is no longer, it happens in the United States, but it was an American passport. We are in our mother's country. We listen to our mother's tongue. Our language shifts, and it shifts us tectonically. Bia, I say. You hear it as demand. Chira nemioi, a complaint. Twin, in our mother's country, we cling to each other, dizzy with disorientation. As delam ta delet, daughter of my mother. Our tongues divide us. The words haven't changed, but here, when we hear them, we do. I crane my head to find you, Nigakon. All the things my sister thinks she doesn't know pull her from me. She doesn't buckle, lets herself be pulled. She is headed into a canyon of silence. She surrenders. I use all the easy phrases I have, every word I've learned and practiced, each success following another, a line of stones. She gets smaller as she gets farther away, so I turn to retrace my steps. I board the bus to cross the tarmac, and two women, younger than I am, move toward each other to free up a seat for me. They smile at me, talk about their boxes of cookies, say what they're going to do on the island we're headed to in the Gulf. I understand whole sentences, can translate their giggles, feel cajoled and embraced, the way I'm meant to. But no language comes. I had over 30 years of moments before this one, and I recognize the reckless flirtation of phrases, the invitation. Each of those moments have led me here, my tongue split to muteness. I want to giggle back at them, spill laughter over them with words. All I can do is smile, and it is a poverty. They are an island themselves, huddling with their shirini, and I am unmoored and floating away. I'm going to read, let's see. This poem is called Tea, and it's written as a definition poem. It's, every entry is another definition of tea, although you'll see that sort of breaks apart, but that's the form here. Tea, a widely cultivated shrub of the family Theaceae, a reception, snack, or meal at which tea is served. The drink made by steeping leaves of the tea plant in water heated over a flame. From the 1980s on, definitively not chai, the spiced, sweetened Indian drink with added milk. In Farsi, chai. Served in glasses to cup in your palm, though traditional glasses have metal holders for protection. Where daughters listen to what's important in a life. Where women complain through the sugar cube they're holding in their teeth and smile when they notice they're crying. Where what's really being drunk is attention. Space of not ritual. I learned that there aren't really rules for tea. I like the noisiest women best. I perform what I know of hierarchy, of who serves whom, and think I'll never have daughters who serve me tea. Relieved there's a place for me here, to serve the tea and behave, to look like I know what that means. Bitter amber drink to wash down sorrow and fear. Tannic tonic, homeroom, safe word. Whisper chai when they ask you what you want. It's never greedy. Synonym, respite, memory, name among women. This next poem is for ancestors and anyone who I am the ancestor for. It's called Don't Forget This Is Not You, and it is in 3 parts, and they have 3 names. I speak to my twin sister. You are not the daughter about to get swept into the ocean. I am not that daughter either. Our grandmothers' grandmothers will have known. There are tasks that need doers. We'll divvy the list. There has to be a sad girl and an angry girl. There has to be one who likes adults and one who always scuttles off. These are our inheritance, bangles that fixed to our wrists like the ones we outgrew, the ones we needed to be cut from. A woman. Here is someone's daughter who wades into the waves fully garbed and watches the birds that bobbed there as they dive into an oncoming surge. Her foothold falters, and her soaked skirts threaten to smother her face as the horizon bends and upends itself in the crash of water overhead. Over and over, she emerges to find her footing. She anchors there. It takes a bit to believe she's standing again. All the women. You are the daughters who appear to be women, though that doesn't make you one. The coat you are wearing cost a lot of money. Who has that kind of cash? That woman isn't a woman if she takes gifts from men. You believe me, don't you? You, those nights I wonder about loneliness. Your tattooed lip liner and your laughter like a line in a poem from childhood. Or you, your sewing fingers, wanting to stitch a chador I would wear for you. You at your stove with a stew, the flavor on my gums of a kitchen I can't fully recall. My heart's chamber keeps refilling with blood. There are others like you, company when I am in danger of vanishing from myself. You are there to love, so I stay, anchored to each of you. You leave the surf to join me for a while, then return. But mostly, you hover in between, arriving and retreating, as if to say, no one is ever gone, and no one is only here. Okay, read a couple more here. This is pleats. Pleats. Sister, let's fold time back on itself. We can pleat it. We'll push our needle through the fold, find silk pants and ruby thread, pull the Qajar dynasty toward us with our stitch. Loop under to anchor, punch the needle through again, and look for Farouk's poems. We'll add a flourish and move on, hips thickening with the ornament of our history. We'll go back and visit the forced unveiling when our sisters watched their futures arrive, like we do, soak our fabric in the tears of change, how quickly it absorbs. We'll bring them code that needs translation, mini skirts and thigh highs, words on the tongues of our men we need to solve. This pleat can turn under, part of the structure of the dress itself, pinned with a stitch of our hair to show it was us there whenever the unraveling comes. When we reach back into this orphaned future in which we tuck ourselves, we'll pin both sides of the rousserie at our chins to free our hands and slip things into our hems. This smartphone, that Excedrin PM, a degree in computer science and math, for what good they do. Let's see. Trying to decide. I have my little set list and yes, I'm going to read Farnaz. This is a poem named Farnaz. It's in 3 parts. 1. That's okay. It's such a beautiful song. Farnaz. 1. Our parents argued in a language we didn't understand. We were born in Las Vegas or Tehran, twin cities of fantasy and chance. My sister and I found our words in Long Beach, big wheels and Barbies, bluebird troops and kidnap breakfasts. A war forced our cousins to buy false passports, lose their savings. We ate Chef Boyardee after school, hot spinach and meatball soup on the weekends. I yelled into a phone so my Iranian family could hear me. I learned I was the silk carpet my mother didn't own, the casino payout my father kept chasing. I didn't know until later the Persian leopard was trapped in the Zagros Mountains after the Iran-Iraq War, in danger of tripping old mines. 2. I taught myself who I was by watching my sister carefully. I worried when the day came and I wanted to say, I'm not her. First out the womb, she was named and I wasn't. Her name is Iranian, but sayable by everyone. My name would wait. They waited until they knew they had it right. Not Sheila, my mother's veto. Farnaz, a name that made me lonely. We lived in between Iran and America, a customs declaration zone. By the time I was born, my mute parents wondered how to speak as Americans as they moved away from the people who loved them. How could I know the dark inside their mouths hurt them too? 3. My father studied numbers in the racing forms, and I bet following my gut. I influenced dice at the craps table by spinning 3 times in each direction while my father placed his bets. Even now, I'll retell stories in my head 100 times to end them right. It's a system. I came from the racetrack, ignoring all the horses in the flesh. I sounded out the names of long shots. The odds say Blinding Telegram will win, but I like the music of Queen the Fox. I believed that how I got my name would mean something. I am still finding the names for some things. The youth my parents brought to parenting, the attention I didn't know I was waiting for, the word for wanting, feeling its deep hole. Such naming I have been slow to do. I am waiting until I have it right. I know that once named, there is a road down which that named thing runs, and I am not the one who built the road. Two more. One, this is the last section of the prose I'll read, and then one short one after that. My muteness. It is like trying to speak while dreaming. In some dreams, I want to yell, which means I know how I feel. I can't say how many times I've wanted to yell in Farsi, but it's not that many. Sometimes I could go far enough in the fantasy that I could understand whole sentences I imagined other people saying, as if I learned this language some deep way when I was very young and my dreamed up conversations with my aunts and uncles are real. Is that what is happening when I want to speak Farsi to my uncle Mohammad, a man who has lived in the States for over 50 years? After being in Iran, I went to visit, and his accented English engaged my Farsi heart. Something inside me leapt awake. You won't believe me if I say this surprises me, but it does. I was raised to speak English. I was a suburban Southern California kid with a name no one tried to get right. I didn't blame them. The only other Middle Easterner in elementary school was named Shubbi Ali. Shubbi's family was from Pakistan. He could turn his eyelids inside out. I am leaving Iran after 6 months. I know I have too much luggage. I'm sent to a special counter to get my bags wrapped, pay extra fees. There is a line, but it's not unforgiving, and I wait. He is a small man, like many Iranians, just a couple inches above my head, but he is sitting at his counter on a stool, so he is above me. I bring up my bags, a large suitcase, a stuffed duffel, a smaller suitcase, and a santour, strapped and tied into its case. He will weigh them. The man asks me about them. I explain what I have done, how I've fallen in love with the music, how much I'm trying to bring home with me. I tell him the size of the carpets folded up inside, the number of kilims, mention the uncles and aunts who helped me. At first, I think I am justifying all the stuff. But then I see his eyes pool, and he says, "You are a daughter of this place, and I hope you plan to come back." He fills out his forms. He fills out his forms, pressing hard to make the copies, and calculates what I owe, taking my tomon from me and shuffling the papers as he stamps them. He hands me the documents and points out where I need to go next, now that my bags are ready. Then he gently gets off of his stool, moves to the side to stand up for me, for emphasis. He says, "It is so good that you came back. What a good thing you did." All I can say is thank you over and over. And then I think I say, "I'm so happy that I came." I walk away from him, looking for the next line. But my heart is beating so fast, my face heats up, and the airport around me is a blur. It's a short one. Reckoning. My cousins know what clings to them. Dust of the border they crossed, paper boxes holding the past. They arrive where I call home. What they choose is to use a new language. I thrive by accident. Divided tongue is my blade in the wild. I invite the day's light through all the windows, gaze at pages where the ink of a country fades. I don't know whether to trace the lines or let go.
Thank you, Farnaz, for the beautiful poems. Okay. Sorry. First of all, I would like to start. Okay. How is that? Is this good? Okay. First of all, I would like to express my solidarity with all the women in revolution in Rojhelat in Iran and in all parts of the world. And it's really nice to be here listening to Farnaz and next to Zeina and sharing poetry and space. I first came across Zeina Hashem Beck's poetry in the pre-pandemic era in Lebanon city, in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, where I lived before I moved here. I found her chapbook, Arabi Song, in the home library of my friends and collaborators, Shuk and Alana Marie Levinson-Labrosse. Ever since, I've tried my best to follow up, and I've translated some of her poems into Kurmanji and Sorani, and these are like signs of my admiration for her work. Zeina Hashem Beck is a Lebanese poet and the author of 2 previous full-length collections of poetry, Louder Than Hearts, Bohan Publishing, 2017, and To Live in Autumn, the Backwaters Press in 2014, as well as 2 chapbooks, Arabi Song, Rattle, 2016, There Was and How Much There Was, Smith, Doorstop, 2016. Educated in Arabic, English, and French, Zeina has a BA and an MA in English literature from the American University of Beirut. Her poem Maqam won Poetry's 2017 Frederick Bock's Prize, and her work appeared in the New York Times, Ploughshares, Poetry, and elsewhere. Zeina is the co-creator and co-host with poet Farah Chamma of Maqsouda, a podcast about Arabic poetry produced by Saud. She recently moved to California with her husband and two daughters. Her most recent book is this like stunning collection of poetry. Yeah, and we're excited to listen to you, to your work. Zeina, the floor is yours. تفضلي.
I'm so happy we got to meet in person. Zeina contacted me when I was still based in Dubai. So I grew up in Lebanon, and for the past decade, I'd been living between Lebanon and Dubai. And we moved to the US, I would say, about 8 months ago. And Zeina contacted me on Instagram saying he's passing through Dubai and would like to meet. And I said, well, I'm actually leaving to California. And then we met in California. Thank you for translating my poetry, and I'm so happy to have met you. I don't have copies of O tonight. I'm sorry, I don't have any left, but it's available if you like what you hear. Okay. I don't do well with like podiums. They like restrict me, but I'll try to be. It's fine. I'm good. I'm good. Yeah. I'm good. Let's just because it's centered and the camera's here, and yeah, it's okay. Thank you. This is called Pilgrim. I see you collect the scatter of houses that abandoned you. Friend, I see you lick the backs of photographs like stamps, and still they fall from your shoulders. In this one, you are young, before countries and children. Sit down. Like you, I collect what worries me. Fatherlands are ominous and comforting like the eyes of those who love us. And my city is a leash that suffocates me the farther I stray from the Mediterranean between the buildings. The swing sings its rust in the wind. Neither water nor stone will do. I've given up cigarettes and libations. I separate the jars on the bookshelves. These are for the ash, and these for the pickled, cheap icons. No matter how much vinegar I pour, the Marys never close their eyes. No matter how many times dawn is slaughtered, I cry when the minarets crow. Okay, I'm just going to adjust it a little bit. Is that okay? This is, the collection was called for the longest time. The working title was Ode to the Afternoon, after this poem that I'm about to read, and then I kind of got rid of everything and just kept the O for many reasons, but yeah, so this is Ode to the Afternoon. My friend tells me she's been running in the cemetery in the afternoon. She calls it just a garden, really? First, I am afraid, and then I am afraid everything is cemetery and garden. My late uncle's flower shop, my daughter learning to fold a paper into a boat, sea salt, marriage, dawn, old French music. This vertical line digging deeper into my forehead each morning. That bicycle in the city tied to a street post with flowers and a note to the girl who rode it. When I was a little girl, I wanted to bury the afternoon, when longing was long and my parents slept and slept. I stood in the corridor and repeated, ay, 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 until I flickered in and out of myself. Some days I even threatened to fling my body from the balcony until my brother, with such calm, looked at me, dangling from the railing, my head thrown backward, and explained, "You don't own your soul. It belongs to God. Only He can decide." I stood in the corridor. I stood on the balcony. I stood in the desolate afternoon and repeated, because what is repetition if not a question? The way Mom, every day, with her hairdryer, with her grocery list, with her buying this shawl and that, is asking, "What have I done? What have I done?" The book says we will see clearly when the drunkenness of death descends. My uncle saw a man and a woman standing by his hospital window and asked his wife who they were. My father, with his prayer beads, with his cigarette, gestured to the driver taking my uncle to his grave to circle back and pass by his flower shop. My father, with his few words, said one last time, "So he." By he, my father meant both his brother and himself. My uncle taught me to sing, "Que sera, sera." He said, "Say it. What will be, will be." I still dread the afternoon and still ask, will I be pretty? Will I be missed? And I still haven't been to his grave, but have driven past his flower shop again and again and again. The way on the night he died, I drove beneath bridges and saw him on each one and waved. I gotta say, thank you. I gotta say, I love your energy behind the camera. He's like going, thank you. He's like, And I also want to say thank you to the Poetry Center. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Persis. And thank you for coming on a Wednesday night. I really appreciate it. There are many poems in this book about motherhood. I think I kind of dared in this book to explore motherhood more and not feel like, oh, it's like such a like domestic thing and I shouldn't write about it. I kind of said, fuck it, I want to write about it. So this is for my daughter who's 12, and when she was 11, a few months before we moved here, she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. It was August 2021, and I wrote this. This is the last poem that I wrote for this collection. I wrote it in September 2021. And this is for her. It's titled Time. Time, be kind to her. She's 11 and already wants to turn you back. She wished this after she squeezed a drop from her index and read me the number. She always insists I close my eyes and guess what her blood is saying. Sometimes I'm wrong, and sometimes not. I kiss the tiny tears on her fingertips. I kiss her arms and thighs before the insulin. When I ask her to inject herself, I'm asking her to live without me, and she knows it. When her legs trembled and I soothed with, I'm here, she reminded me, but you can't do anything. Perhaps she meant undo. Who am I kidding? Time, I demanded your undoing too that first night in the hospital before dawn, when I woke up having forgotten, then remembered where I was. What had happened, the neon corridor light, the nurse's chatter, the potassium slow burn in my daughter's vein. Time, I know I can't reason with you. You go on and on. Instead, I'm wishing her astonishing slowness, softness inside the arduous and unfair. Like this: the dog's limp, the cold coffee, the struggling baby bougainvillea, the winged ant on the floor, the half-eaten sandwich, the tenderness of the 5 a.m. light, the daily departures, the basil plant's shadow on the wall, and her hair. The swing of my love's hair as she runs, shaking her head left and right, left and right. How she always ran like this, always ran as if swaying, no, no. There are some bilingual poems in this book. I don't know if anyone here understands Arabic other than Zedan, but I thought I'd read one anyway. So the bilingual poems, I call them duets, and the idea is that if you only read English, you have a poem in English on the left side of the page, and if you only know Arabic, you can read a poem in Arabic on the right side of the page, and if you know both, then you're messed up like me. Your head doesn't know what it's doing. It's reading like this, and hopefully a third poem opens up inside the conversation between these two languages, and the conversation is sometimes a contradiction. This is an ode to the Mediterranean Sea in Lebanon, a sea that I have such a relationship with. I've always felt like it was so close to me, it was always there. But also in Beirut, you forget there's a sea because there's so many buildings and you don't have access to it. So this is Blue أزرق. نرى البحر ولا نراه إلا في المنام. A patch, a glimpse among the antennas أو من بين الأشرطة على الأسطح. How to brave this blue? لا بحر لنا هنا ولا قوة. Sometimes I forget the sea is this close. لنا حب قديم يريد أن يحفر لك في الإسمنت شاطئا. My love, I want to dig a beach for you out of this cement. لنا مطر محمل تارة بعطش الأرض وتارة بعفن الشارع. Oh, old faith and new. Oh, time of wells and time of satellite dishes. لنا الحر والرقص على ظهور المباني. قد نرى بقعة بحر من هناك. Are the fish still edible? Our nets are full of plastic and trash. لنا كأس تجري فينا كنبع صغير ننسج فيه سماء وغروبا ونجوما وتراتيلا. My parents threw me in the sea when I was 2, and I floated. They called me little fish. My parents trusted the sea. إلهنا الأزرق لم نعد نعبده وما زلنا نحبه. Oh, blue gods we no longer worship, but still love. لما لا نتذكر البحر إلا عندما تموت العصافير على الشرفات. Over breakfast, I had to convince a friend Beirut was still on the Mediterranean. لمن ندون أحلامنا كل صباح. Are you sure? He asked. Is it a deep, bluest blue? ما أجمل الموت بلا ضرائح. Yes, I said. No, I said. ارفعني على كتفيك قبل أن نحرق المدينة. Lift me on your shoulders. Roll in the tires. Light them up. Oh, city, we no longer love, but still worship. لقد أقسمنا أن نقلع عن عبادة هذه المدينة. Okay, so I think it's good to transition into revolution song. So I wrote this before October 2019. October 2019 is when people flooded the streets all over Lebanon, and there was like a huge revolution. Some people refuse to call it a revolution, and that's fine. They call it an uprising. I called it a revolution. And so this was before like the burning of the tires, and it was before the actual burning of the tires, but I think it kind of says something about like how our countries kind of are stuck in this loop of like almost never changing. And but every time there's hope, we are like all there. So I, you know, not to like, I'm not to depress you, Persis, but I really hope, yeah, Iran does much better than Lebanon did. I really, really hope. So also in solidarity with Iran, I will read this. So I wrote this at the height of hope. Like I wrote this when people were still in the streets, and I was stupidly hopeful, but that's okay. We need it. This is a revolution song for Lebanon, October 2019. With raised fists, with floods of fury, with ululation, with forbidden song, with the 8 p.m. clatter of pots and pans, with heartbreak, with memes, with rapture, with hands. We call this revolution. How you laugh, how you march, how you rest, how you run, how you get caught in your dangerous hope. No one can wall this revolution. And love is difficult. And love is divine. And if you must have God, let it be love. Let it be love with its toil and terror. Let it be love with its prophecy and mess. Let it be love with its rise and fall. This revolution is now like our bodies, is eternal, like dust, is on balconies, is on screens, is in beds, is on streets, is in the mind, is in the mind, is in the mind, is in the breath and the eyeball. This revolution. Praise the candle flames and the tire fumes. Praise the graffiti and the broken glass. Praise the names of cities and villages. Praise the old man who leans on his cane and chants. Praise the young man who pounds on the wall. Is he crying? Praise the detainees who won't be beaten into silence. Praise those who wait for them under the rain. Praise this October birth. Every month be October. Every year, every ache and balm be October. Praise the dancing and the sweat and the tired feet. Praise the swearing and the red flare and the rage. Praise it all, this revolution. Close the roads and open them. Occupy the streets. Bring the tires, the sofas, the drums, the blaring cars. Close the dead palaces of power and resurrect the abandoned places, the squares, that infinite country inside you. Close the roads and open them. Close the classrooms and open the tents. Bring vinegar and cloth. Bring your hurt and your tongue. Let it wreck and awaken and enthrall this revolution. The name is Thawra, and Thawra is woman. The woman who kicked the thug in the gut. The woman they came for with sticks. The woman they came for with law. The woman who fed and the woman who prayed, who kissed her lover on the street, who steadied her child on her waist, who waved from the old balcony in her nightgown and white hair, who scolded the soldier, who slept on the bridge, who explained on the mic, who wailed above the blood. Call her, my people, call her Thawra, Thawra, Thawra. Call this revolution. I think one more is good. I mean, I don't want to, because it's already 7:30, right? Yeah, one more. Okay, I'll do. So since then the revolution, after the revolution, Lebanon collapsed and Beirut exploded, I started taking antidepressants. And this is a poem for my friends called Thank You, Antidepressants. Reader, let me tell you how I keep it together. Friendships and antidepressants. Long walks on the beach with H. He pretends these are workouts. And Nutella in bed with R. She sends boil the water, you better have chocolate, from her car. And endless voice notes with L. She calls them personal podcasts. And WhatsApp stickers on demand from F. It is time to MILF, said her sticker with my face and red lipstick on my 40th birthday. And rants with H, another H, about weight and the lands that spit us out. And talks under midnight bougainvillea with R, same R, about our mothers and children's rage. And daily morning phone calls with L, another L, about nausea and food and skin allergies she's got, though no doctor can confirm. And I say, if you're sure you got it, then you got it. You got it. And jokes across continents with H, another H, about impossible geographies, and arguments with M about whether we got married in 2005 or 2006. I say, our first married summer was a year before the war, and he says, no, it was the summer of the war, and we laugh at how we measure time with pain, but not without tenderness. And conversations with G, better name this one, God, about my dislike for organized religion. And more long voice notes with H, other H, about the opposite of grace. This happens daily. So thank you, friends who are there when the sadness comes or when my teeth fall apart. My teeth do that bi-yearly. Friends who unscared me of antidepressants, who reassured me I won't become another Z or my grandmother. And yes, thank you, antidepressants, and you, reader, who stayed with me and might be wondering why so many of my friends' names' first letters are the same. And the answer is, when I said together in the first line of this poem, I didn't mean it against fragmentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Zeina and Farnaz. Does anyone have any questions for the poets? And if so, there's a microphone over here that we can use for that. Does anybody in the audience want to bring some questions and they could respond? Would you do? Yeah, you need to go stand over there. Go in the corner.
Borderless, countryless, maybe even beyond language. And I just wonder if the thing that you had to do.
I think we should just like kind of stand next to each other here. Thank you. So what was the question again? It was like about does it open up borderless? Okay, so I'm not sure. One would hope that it opens up a borderless space, but I think my interest personally in when I was writing the duets is to see and experiment with, well, first of all, kind of like, because I jump languages like all the time in my head and when I speak to people, so I wanted to see like what it's like to write like this. This is how it started, but then it evolved into like, well, how am I writing about the same thing differently if I change languages? So will I write about Lebanon the same way if I wrote about it in Arabic? No, you don't, because the language you use changes your perception, even if it's very slightly. It changes your perception. And this is why I said it's a contradiction. So that I always say, I mean, I'm not sure, it's not like a theory set in stone, but I feel like in Arabic, I could be more ruthless with Lebanon. I could be more like, I don't know, like meaner to Lebanon in Arabic, whereas in English, because in Arabic you don't have to explain, right? Yeah, there's no explanation. Whoever's reading this already knows the shit that we've been through, so that you can rage, or not necessarily rage, but kind of start, even if you're like, if it's a calm poem, you're starting within a space that you just, you know? Whereas in English, I'm a little bit kinder, maybe because I'm aware of a different audience, maybe because when you leave, so maybe because English is a leaving, right, a departure. And when you leave a place, you feel bad for it. You feel like you feel, not bad for it, but you feel there's a soft spot in your heart for it, even if you're still angry at it, right? So it feels to me like Arabic is a return and English is a departure. And I guess it was interesting to see, so when you put return and departure together in the same poem, what do you get, you know? I'm not sure, but it's cool to work like that, you know? It's just, yeah.
It's really interesting to hear you talk about it. I don't think of myself as I can't go back and forth the way that Zeina talks about going back and forth. That's not in me. But I am quasi bilingual now, having studied and learned Farsi as an adult, and but I move back and forth very consciously when I do it. However, it's a really interesting question, because what I've been thinking about is that, in fact, Farsi makes me feel more gentle and tender. And it's the language that I learned, I was loved by certain people when I was a child in Farsi. And so my spouse says to me, you're nicer when you're speaking Farsi. Like, you're a nicer, you feel, he doesn't speak Farsi, but he thinks it. And I think that he's right, that there's some part of my heart that like relaxes in that language. And I was trying, piece of for 40 years I never spoke, and then I saw him and I really wanted to speak Farsi to him, even though he didn't raise his kids with Farsi, but I had that impulse, as like that. But the other thing that I wanted to address was this. I do think that letting myself, and this is, I think, modeled by like Gloria Anzaldúa and Borderlands, like some writers that have started to, in California, write in multiple languages and just said, I'm going to do it, fuck it. I thought, oh, what happens if I let myself just move back and forth between place and between memories that are both in English and Farsi, and maybe even just little words. And so a lot of the origins of the long piece, Sister Tongue, came from like that practice of like, what happens if you just remember one phrase you learned and go from there. And it's really that connection between the language and memory and many of those memories were in English, was really profound. I thought was really powerful, and as a writer, gave me a space and permission that I hadn't given myself before. And I had thought that I had to write a certain way, or I'd write, be strong in a certain language, and it let me sort of move around and be goofy, like, not perfect, like awkward, I guess is the better word, and not have a problem with it. So that's, it's a good, I think, I've been trying to do that with certain people, like students, just to say, what happens, try it. So, thank you for the question. I thought I saw, did you have it? Yeah, go, to the corner. How memory, did you ask how memory works in that? Right. Well, you've spoken really eloquently about it. I have to say, like, your question is rather intelligent about knowing that, and also what you heard in Zeina's poem, which I think you got word for word those lines. Yeah, it's so beautiful. I think there's a lot of ways to enter that question, and what I think about is the way that when I try to understand which Farnaz is having the experience, like the memory. There's hundreds of them, and I want to allow all the selves to be in the poems. So I've really cultivated that like space to not be one person, and this book is really intentional about that. And memory, certain memories can be ageless, but I think they're often rooted in like an emotion, an age. Like, so is it a child telling this memory? Is it an innocent memory, or is it fraught with adult perspective? And of course, I don't think you can do that when you're first writing a draft. But when I'm thinking about the craft of a poem, trying to pay attention to where the memory comes from, what emotional maturity it comes from, and what other experiences are informing the memory. And that's how I would go back to it, or try to make it the best poem, try to revise it that way. But I don't know, I'm pretty sure I don't do that at the beginning, because it's just, that would be too much looking. And I don't know if that that is what you were after, but that's sort of what comes up for me.
So, I mean, I love how, like, messed up memory is, and, like, how you can remember a thing differently so many. Like, I haven't written a poem about this, but I know, like, someday. So here's the thing, actually, in terms of, like, actual writing, like writing, when you sit down and write and you decide, I'm going to use this memory, for example. I feel there are certain moments that I've always known this is going to go into a poem someday. but I try not to rush it, and this is you've answered yourself. The purposefully is very important. So that, for example, there's a crown of sonnets here, titled "Poem Beginning and Ending with My Birth," and it starts with the memory of my mother remembering. So see the layers. She's remembering the day I was born, and the story she's always told me, ever since I was a little girl, that the day you were born, I saw everything before it happened. So I woke up, I knew I was gonna have contractions, I had contractions. I knew your brother was gonna, so it was like a deja vu kind of the whole day. And I was like, wow, what do I do with this? And I held on to this for so many years, and this is like the third full length, this is when I felt ready to kind of like, okay, I think now I'm ready to kind of really dig into this memory and feel, you know, what does it mean, as to just kind of list it as a cool thing that happened, you know? So I think you just use time, which is essential, right, for memory. So speaking of departure and return, memory is about leaving and returning as well. So you keep returning to it until you feel, I'm ready now. I don't know if that's like a very vague answer, but I think in this book particularly, I relied a lot on childhood memories, I think. In the first book, it was all memories of Beirut. The entire book was about Beirut, so it was a memory about a place. In this book, it was about people, like my uncle, my mother, my grandmother. So it's just such a beautiful playfield for poetry. I mean, it's where stories are born. Like, what are stories? It's just people remembering stuff, right? And telling them, so, yeah. I feel so bad we kept them that long. Like, it's, yeah. I feel you should, like, reward yourself and just, like, go eat some cheese and crack. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, get Farnaz's book, please. Yes, yes. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I love her. It's some of my favorites.